Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of actors feel that something's missing, right? Certainly that was the case for me. And sometimes they know it and it's specific for them, and sometimes they can't articulate it. They just feel that something is missing. And that was kind of part of my own journey, right? Studying, first of all, at conservatoire, and then working for years in Poland in the kind of post-Grotowski work, and sort of trying to bring all of that to bear on my own teaching of acting, my own work personally, but my own teaching of acting, and just feeling constantly that there was something missing. There was a piece missing somewhere, and being very frustrated with why acting was so accidental, why most acting techniques were so accidental, meaning sometimes actors connected and sometimes not. Sometimes they found inspiration, sometimes not. It was fleeting and kind of evasive, elusive rather. And when I discovered Demidov, as I've said to you before, it was just like someone had flicked on a light in a dark room, and suddenly everything I'd been trying to do myself, working intuitively towards this way, somebody had already gone down that path and just blazed it so completely thoroughly, with such a deep understanding of the creative process, of the way human psyche works, the way the subconscious affects our creativity, or rather the fact that our creativity arrives to us unconsciously. All great artists, I believe, access that place anyway. It's just that Demidov created a path there of accessing that inspiration consistently with a particular inner technique that gives actors access to a sense of creative freedom, spontaneity, a sense of inner improvisation, as well as outer. Mm-hmm. But access to their inner life in ways that is very often surprising to the actor, and surprising that it happens so quickly. And you've seen this yourself. Actors who come to this work for the first time, from the first day of their work, they are accessing things they didn't know was there. And they're often surprised by it. In fact, a few times I've had actors come in after the first etude, they're kind of just amazed and saying, what just happened? Because we are bypassing analysis. We are bypassing the way acting is usually taught, that you have to know what you're doing in every moment. That the way to get to inspiration and our inner creativity is through analysis, is through knowing what's happening in every moment. Well, my question was always, why? Why do you have to know what you're doing in every moment? We don't know what we're doing in every moment in life. We don't know what we're going to say next. We don't know what we're going to do next. It's exactly the same on stage or on film or television or whatever it might be. Yes, we know, of course, we've got the script. We know what happens. But in this work, and Demidov's part of Demidov's technique is the ability to let go of that, to forget it, to forget what happens next, and to live here only in this moment. Because as we know, there is never any next. There is only now. There is only ever this moment. Next takes care of itself. And we are learning to surrender fully to the truth of the experience I'm having now in this moment. And when we do that, everything else unfolds. Nature unfolds on its own. Mm-hmm. So, bizarrely, Demidov is showing us how to come back to our true nature. Not to what we think should be, or what should happen, or the way the scene should go. All of that, as we know, is governed by the circumstances of the scene. But within that, learning to surrender to those circumstances, then we are just carried like a river, like a force. And then acting becomes effortless. It's no longer about trying or doing or striving. Completely opposite.
Yeah. I remember, because you were talking about creativity, I remember when I was doing self-tapes in the kitchen back in my old flat, and everything was built, everything was, this is going to happen, this is how I'm going to feel, this is how the scene will go, there's the shift, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like I took all the creativity out of it, and I just became a craftsperson hammering nails in a board, and it never worked, and it was so disappointed, and you did take after take, and then at some point you just said, fuck this. I just do one where I
do what you want.
Everything out of the window and just do what I want.
Yeah.
And that's just the takes that I ended up using at the end.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
And they were still not free, because all of that preparation work came in from the back of my head saying like, no, this is supposed to go here. And you should do it like that. And it just set me up for a path of failure. And and then sometimes it happened where I could forget about all of that, and out of the frustration of it not working, and then something happened. But the way to get there was just atrocious and pointless, and at the end of the day not as alive as it could be.
No, and this takes us right back to the origins of Stanislavski's technique, right? System. That he believed that the way to get to the subconscious was through the conscious mind. Now, he did move a bit on that later, but he never fully let go of it. And of course, for Demidov, that was absurd. It's not possible by definition to get to the subconscious through the conscious mind. That we have to, from the first day of training, be taken straight there, straight to the subconscious. And, what you're describing is a very common story, right? What's your task? Focus on your task. Okay, I've got my task, but now I'm not relaxing my muscles. Relax your muscles. Okay, but you need some communion with your partner. Focus on communion. No, but now you've lost your objective. Come back to your... It's insane. We don't walk around in our lives thinking like that, right? Yeah. I'm not walking around in my life thinking, what's my action? These things arrive to us unconsciously, and we are responding moment by moment. We either surrender to something or we don't. We either give in to it completely or we don't. Now, normally in our lives, we very rarely surrender to anything fully. Doesn't mean it doesn't arise in us. It's a matter of whether our protective mechanism kicks in to keep us safe from wherever that might be. But in our work, we are learning not only to go straight to the subconscious, but learning how to surrender to what's arising. Surrender to the very first thing that's arising in us and give into it fully, because in that lies the truth. In that lies everything else that unfolds out of that truth. And we never have to plan that. I often get asked, well, all of this freedom thing's great for training. Not only asked, but I was told this by certain acting teachers at a particular school. Yeah, that's all great. In the first year, that's a great thing. Get them to be free. But then they have to start, focusing and knowing what they're doing. There is a complete misunderstanding of how the creative process functions. And there is a sort of misconception that this work, that freedom somehow equals chaos. And as we know, that's not the case. That what we are learning to surrender to is character, is circumstances, right? Is responses from the partner, the atmosphere, the space itself. When I surrender to circumstances and I surrender to character, and I've done my proper preparation, there can be no mistakes because my behavior is governed by the circumstances. I'm not going to do something crazy that's not in the script that my character doesn't do. If I fully prepared properly and I'm surrendering to that character and to those circumstances, not knowing necessarily what they are, but I'm being carried by them, and that is dictating my behavior.
It's funny because when you know everything, then you feel safe, but you can't be safe and free at the same time.
Yeah, that is truth. And you can, there is always structure in freedom. You can't have freedom without structure. It's just that most of the time we're unaware of the structure. We are unconscious. We are not conscious of the structure. But you can have structure without freedom. And that's unfortunately what we see a lot on our stages and film and whatever else it might be. So we never have to worry that things are going to have no structure or be chaotic. That's just not possible. That's just not the way the creative process works. Just that, as I said, most of the time we're not aware of the structure that's guiding us. Structure is circumstances, structure is character, right? Structure is relationship with partners, structure is atmosphere, environment, all of those things. But as soon as we become conscious of those things, we are in our head. We are in our head center, not in our heart and belly centers, which is where we live as actors. So that's kind of the major difference between this work and other approaches. Now, I'm not saying that other approaches don't have freedom, but the question is what kind of freedom and to what degree. So, yeah, that's what I would say is kind of a major difference. As you know, there are many differences in this work, which is why I really believe it is a revolution in actor training, because it's it's asking the actor from the first day to change their view, to turn around the telescope and look through the other end and see the bigger, wider picture, not this narrow thing that's way in the distance that I'm chasing, because we end up just chasing our tails. So it's an interesting thing in this Demidov work, the way this bizarre idea that somehow you can run after being free, right? When the director says, okay, we've done all this, you've done all the analysis, you've done 5 days of table work, you've got your objective, you've got your, you've got all of the elements in place, now find some freedom. And as we know, it's too late. It's too late.
I had that experience. After years of training in a particular technique, we had a showcase of scenes, and everything was done like usually in preparation before, even to the dot and where and how to say the lines in a sense. And at the end, the teacher just told us, now you can be free. And I was just sitting there and I'm thinking like, how can I be free now? Because I'm so restrained by all this.
Yeah.
And we did the show and the people were coming up and he was saying like, this is the best way I've seen the scene. And I felt like crushed, because I was questioning the past years of my experience in working like that. And I felt like this can't be it. This is not, we've trained on freedom, quote unquote, so many years. And now it's this, and this is not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And again, it's just a misunderstanding that, like the idea of making choices, right? That we are, that seems to be almost a religion in acting. You make strong choices, weak choices, bad choices. The idea of making a choice, where does it put us? Immediately in our heads. In our work, we don't talk about making choices. We rather say there are no choices. There are only inevitabilities. Something arrives to me and I surrender to it. How is that a choice? By making a choice, we are immediately conscious of something. And when we become conscious of it, we are not free. We are not free to give in to it. I have to become aware of something and decide this or this. But even then, we could argue that choice still arrives to me. Do you want tea or coffee? I want coffee. Did I choose or did that arrive to me? So it's an interesting thing, right? And unfortunately, we are stuck in a cycle of analysis. We're stuck in a world in which we believe we walk around making choices. But most of these things arrive to us unconsciously. Most of the choices we make on a daily basis are unconscious. Less than 1% of things we do in our daily lives happens consciously. So this is something Demidov understood very deeply, more so than any other acting teacher of his generation, including Stanislavski. Stanislavski saw the value of what he was doing. He just couldn't get there himself. And in the end, as you know, right, Thomas, Stanislavski, before he died, said that Demidov was the only teacher who truly understood his system. Tried to make it better, tried to make Stanislavski change his mind on many things, tried to make him throw the whole thing out and start again. And of course, as you know, he was fired a couple of times because of that. And the reason that not many people know about him today, right? That he was pretty much written out of history because, like all great, I want to say revolutionaries, he's challenging an orthodoxy, and those who function under that orthodoxy never like that. So he was kind of written out.
There's a funny story about an Austrian actor who didn't have any formal training, so to speak, and who's just really acting from his guts. And he was being asked in an interview, how is he doing it? The acting, because he's so alive in the moment. And he said he doesn't want to think about it, because if he starts to think about it, he's afraid he can't do it anymore. And he compared it to being a professional skier, like an athlete, going downhill. And if you think about all the tiny parts and all the things you have to go around, and I think you can't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, sometimes I'm not saying that certain amount of analysis isn't important. It is, but that's not where we start. And, you know, there's a wonderful, Ian McGilchrist, who is this psychiatrist, philosopher, neuroscientist, who has written a couple of wonderful books, and all of his work was on the different ways that the two hemispheres of the brain bring the world into being. The left being more, narrowly focused, about grasping, about decontextualizing, and not seeing the bigger picture, and the right kind of seeing the bigger picture, more holistic, seeing things in context. But he makes the point that we usually capture the world through the right hemisphere first, more holistically. Then it transfers to the left to kind of process things, and comes back to the right to again see the bigger picture. And he kind of makes this analogy of, playing a piece of music, for example, hearing it first in its entirety, in context, more globally. And then to practice a certain difficult passage, certain things have to become conscious, right? Which notes I'm playing, right? The repetition of that. But then again, when you play that performance, you have to let go of that narrow view, and again see it as the whole, feel it as a whole. So, in a sense, there are certain things in acting that, yes, we might look at more closely in a conscious way, but in our work, it's more about synthesis than analysis. About allowing things to come together, arise and come together holistically, not breaking them apart and trying to study them separately. There are certain times where we might focus on one aspect, but it's never the kind of analysis that keeps us in our heads. It's always an emotional analysis. I'm exploring a particular part of a scene, for example. It's always emotional analysis, right? It's never intellectual. I might come to understand it later intellectually, but never in the moment. So it's an interesting thing, right? He's one guy I would like to have a conversation with, Ian Gilchrist, at some point in these creative conversations, because I think his work is amazing. And he just seems to be an incredibly lovely human being, which also is a huge bonus.
The impossible task of breaking Demidov down into 2 sentences.
Oh, yeah, it is kind of impossible. Whenever people ask me what is the essence of the work, I always say creative freedom. Now that sounds perhaps a bit like a cliche, but I don't see freedom very often when I go to see acting. And the sad part of all that is that actors very often don't even know they're not free. They're so used to working in a particular way, mechanically, analytically, that they lose touch with that sense of what freedom can be. But, as I often say, once you get a taste of it, of what it means to be truly free, to really access the truth, it's impossible to go back, or at least very difficult. But for me, it's also the fact that it is an acting technique, but it's also more than that. It's about what it means to be a human being. It's about the nature of creativity. It's the nature of our psychology, the nature of our relationships. Being able to access the truth of relationship is just as important as my own personal freedom. But of course, these things are connected. You can't have one without the other. You can't have the truth of relationship without surrendering to my own personal truth. And then that becomes a more global truth. But I guess the thing about Demidov is that he is teaching us how to access inspiration consistently. And in that way, he was drawing on these kind of more secret, let's say, techniques of the great tragedians of the 19th century who did work in the way that you just described with this actor, right? They called them actors of the gut. And they had particular techniques to be able to access that creativity, which they only passed on between them, right? It was a kind of, because not everyone, it took, yes, talent, but it also took a lot of dedication. And so that's why they only passed this kind of technique on to, between them, basically, to those people who really wanted to do it. So Demidov, in a sense, sort of stole the fire from the gods, and drew a lot of inspiration from these great tragedians when he was developing his own technique, which then became a school. But that's what I would say. Putting it in a couple of sentences is very difficult, but I can only do it by comparison to what other approaches sort of teach.
Do you see, like a lot of actors nowadays, trying to get a quick fix in order to get into the business?
Yeah. It's understandable. It's not their fault, right? We live in a world that demands instant results, and doesn't focus so much on process. In our work, we don't focus on results ever. It's always only about process, and results take care of themselves. But unfortunately, we do live in a cultural environment that demands those results. And so it's not surprising that young actors, not only young, but usually, are coming asking for some tools. Just give me some tools to make me successful. And of course, we can do that because we know that this work has instant results, if you want to put it that way. But I'm not so interested in that, and I'm less interested in working with those kinds of actors. There's no judgment, right? Good luck to you if that's what you want. It's just that I'm more interested in working with actors who really want to go somewhere, who are really interested in exploring who they are as artists, and going as far as they can go to be the best artists they can be, which, as we know, never stops. We never stop exploring. We never stop experimenting and discovering for as long as we are active as actors or artists. But yeah, it's true. I very often see kind of two kinds of ambition of actors who come to this work. One is, as you said, I just give me something to make me successful quickly. And the other, you can tell, right? The actors who are very interested they feel something is missing. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't, sometimes it's not conscious to them, but they just feel there's a lack. And this work speaks to that lack. Because they immediately, when they come to this work, feel that lack is being fulfilled. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that in one workshop that's over and now I'm fixed. It's a constant process of unveiling, of going deeper into who I am as an actor, and deepening my work, deepening my experience of the work. But you can tell the difference between these two kinds of actor when they come. Now, I'm generalizing, right? But that's kind of generally the two kinds of actor I see. And the ones who are the latter kind, the one who want to go somewhere, they're usually the ones who keep going in this work. We get a lot of actors who come and they might do one workshop and they think it's amazing, but they don't come back because they're on to the next thing, right? They're chasing the next shiny object. And that's fair enough. Good luck to them. They're exploring. They want to see what's out there. I totally understand that. But those ones who really connect with it and really want to explore something, they're usually the ones who stay.
Mm-hmm. And why are you teaching?
Sorry?
Why are you teaching?
Why am I teaching?
Yeah.
Well, as I said before, it's not only the fact that I love this work so much and I want other actors to experience it. That's mainly it. But as my good friend Vicky from the Demidov Studio in Athens often says, we feel that this is the work that actors deserve. And I see so much in my experience, my personal experience of working in other ways, working in other techniques, exploring for many years different ways of working, and then coming to this work was a revelation. And many actors who come to this work experience the same thing, that it's a revelation to them. They didn't know it could be this way. And this work also opens up a sense of generosity in people that perhaps wasn't there before. So when you come to this work, very often you don't want to keep it to yourself. You want other people to experience what you have experienced. You want other people to know the truth of what's possible for an actor. And also other creative artists. I've worked with dancers, writers who come to this work who find, because what Demidov created, yes, it's an acting technique, but like I said, it's more than about acting. It's kind of before any technique, because it's a deep understanding of the creative process, how the creative process functions, and how we can access it. And that is available to any artist. Doesn't matter the discipline. Because all artists work from that place. All artists work from that place of the gut, that place of intuition, the place of the unconscious, the place of stillness. And as you know, there are certain, what Demidov calls cultures or principles of the work. Culture of passivity, meaning not doing, as opposed to Stanislavski's activity, right? But not doing, learning to not do, to be open and porous and available to whatever forces are working through me. A culture of calm, absolutely important, vital. Our ability to be calm. If we cannot be calm, and I think that our ability to be calm may not be the most important, but it's one of the most important assets an actor has. If you cannot be calm, you cannot be creative.
I had some funny experiences with that, with other techniques as well, where the doing thing, it made so much tension.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I don't keep up this tension, it's going away and I'm losing it. I have to, but it felt so weird. And
yeah,
I experienced the opposite of, okay, I'm not doing anything, and everything just came.
Yeah.
It just came from like the base, from the roots. That just came up and took me as a whole. Instead of the tension was always like up here, and as soon as I let it go, everything just went away.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of actors mistake physical tension for emotion. Because they're so tense and wound up and pushing, they mistake that for being emotion. And when they allow that to drop away, they feel like they're doing nothing. Well, yeah, you are doing nothing, but you're leaving the whole door open to a universe of possibility of actual thought, feeling, movement, emotion, physical sensation, whatever you want to call it. But it's a very funny thing that very often actors experience something when they come to this work, but they say after, but I felt like I was doing nothing. And of course that's true on one hand. On the other hand, what happened was that they allowed that physical tension to drop away, but it's such an ingrained habit. It's often not so easy for them to trust doing nothing.
Yeah, the anxiety creeps in of, oh, I'm doing nothing, I'm not acting.
Yeah, exactly.
This is wrong.
Exactly. But as I say, once they get a taste of it, they can sense for themselves, right? We are, I'm not here trying to proselytize for Demidov, because I know that this work it's not going to be for everybody. Not that everybody couldn't benefit, but it's not going to be for everybody because a lot of actors are happy doing what they're doing and they don't feel they need anything else, and that's fine. I always say, if you feel what you're working with is working for you, do that. That's great. You should do that, and then you don't need us. Mm. But this work, I find, firstly, is really for actors who feel that something's missing, even if they don't know what that something is.
I remember I didn't know. I felt like exactly there's something missing. Mm-hmm. And also I came to the point where the work I did before was kind of opposite, where everything was created, everything was to the point where I felt like I don't need character or circumstances at all, because I'm just, carving this out of the stone with that nonsense. Mm-hmm. To the point where I felt like this is bullshit. I should only need character and circumstances. Mm-hmm. That should be the base, and I don't need all the other things. Mm-hmm. So I was going to search for that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
it's a great example. I think a lot of actors are searching. I don't believe anybody just wants to be successful. They might think that, but there's always something, underlining it. And like I say, we get a lot of people who just come and they're trying something new, and they might move on to the next thing. But it does speak to actors who are searching. They don't know necessarily what they're searching for. They just, as you said, right, they just feel that there's a lack somewhere here. And how do you then, how do you maintain a career in acting if you constantly feel there's a lack, if you constantly feel there's something missing?
I also had the sense of I'm lacking, or I had the wish to truly experience.
Yeah. And of course, that's what this work is, the Demidov work, the school of experiencing, which is what Stanislavski wanted to create. But Demidov was actually able to do it, and do it consistently, teach the actor how to do it. Or rather, I don't even like the word teacher, because we are not teaching anything. All we are doing is facilitating the actor's own creativity, helping the actor to connect to their own talent and to have faith again in that talent, that is always there and it never went anywhere. It's just been crushed, usually. So, yeah.
As a funny side note, maybe, there was a time where I tried to mold myself into the person that other people would want to work with, in a sense. Like, I have to be, also when you talk to agents, just do it more friendly, just be a bit more, so people want to work with you and stuff. And then you become like nothing. You become like this gooey thing, and nobody wants to actually be with that person, and you don't want to be that person. And when I started this work, not only in terms of the acting, it changed completely, but also I got to the point where I looked at myself as an artist again, which I was before. And all of that, funny enough, made way more work, and way more stuff is happening.
That's great to hear, and it's very true that we are through this work we are allowing ourselves to discover who we are as artists, because we are very often, for whatever reason, we lose faith in that. We lose faith in who we are. We lose faith in our talent, in our abilities. One word from a terrible acting teacher or drama school or whatever it might be, director, very easy to crush that faith. It's so easy to crush it. One single word can do it. And what's not easy is to lift that up again, is to find that faith again, rediscover it. Never went anywhere. But in this work, it's also what I love so much about it, is that we are looking to reinstill that faith in the actor's own talent. And it's not about me, it's not even about the technique. Technique is just a vehicle for that actor to access their own creativity. And then it's just that what Demidov created is such a complete vehicle that we know we can rely on it. We know we can constantly rely on the fact that that faith is going to keep growing. And after a while, I just take that as a given. That faith is there, which then allows me to explore so much more. It's an interesting thing with this work, that it touches so many aspects of life both conscious and unconscious. And it doesn't stop when you leave the studio, right? I often find that in our meetings or gatherings or whatever, that actors are, saying thank you for the work and the way they've noticed how they've changed as people in their lives. And it's not surprising because you don't just leave it behind when you leave the studio. So it's an interesting thing, and another thing I really love about this work, like I said, it's about who we are as people, how we treat each other, how we listen, right? How we speak to other people, and to, as we say in our work, to truly hear and truly see, which we very often don't do in our lives. We are just, I'm listening to you talk, but I'm not really listening. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next. So it's an interesting thing what this work does.